Chapter 16 is all about work orders and turnovers. First and most important is understanding how to submit a work order. Tenants must always submit their work order via Folio. They must go to their tenant portal and submit a work order from there. Please see our video on how to submit a work order, which is attached here too. Please keep in mind that if a tenant goes to the on-site manager and asks for a work order to be done, the on-site manager must direct and teach the tenant how to submit a work order via Folio. On-site managers, please do not submit the work orders for the tenant unless it's an emergency. It is very important that our tenants become independent and know how to do these submittals themselves. Once a tenant posts a work order in Folio, the following steps must be followed every time. Step 1. The on-site manager must review the tenant's basic information. For example, the on-site manager must make sure before they call this tenant that they have an updated phone number and email for all the tenants in this unit. They must also make sure and verify that the birth dates of the tenants, IDs, emergency contact, license plate information, pet pictures, and renter's insurance is updated for every single tenant. Step 2. The on-site manager must call the tenant. Once they call the tenant, they must verify the work order and get further information regarding the work required. It is very important to fully understand the scope of work. For example, if the work order states roof, the on-site manager must call to clarify with the tenant before scheduling this work order. If it's a simple aesthetic problem, a handyman can fix it. However, if the roof is falling apart, we might need a roofer. Therefore, understanding the full scope of the problem is crucial before scheduling the work with a handyman or vendor. The on-site manager must request the tenant uploads pictures showing the problems if pictures have not already been uploaded. They must also take the opportunity to update any missing contact information described above. Number 4, they must get permission to enter. And number 5, they must confirm scheduled date and time with tenant. Step 3. The on-site manager must review the work order and determine if it's an emergency, a non-urgent repair and maintenance, or an aesthetic type of situation. And obviously, he or she will schedule the work order in accordance to priority. If it's an emergency, you schedule it before an aesthetic type of complaint. And we also obviously schedule in accordance to other work orders and their importance. And at this time, the on-site manager would schedule to the handyman or a third-party vendor. It is very important that the on-site manager not just automatically schedules to our handyman, but truly understands the problem to then schedule the work with a correct person. Step 4, the on-site manager must make sure he or she or the vendor or handyman plan to get all the material needed for the work order. Again, this is why the description and scope of work is so important to get ahead of time. And step number 5, it is always important to send the tenant a 24-hour notice, at least 24 hours before our technician or vendor is sent to address the problem. Now let's talk about work orders once the work is completed. Once the work order is completed by the handyman or vendor and checked by the on-site manager, the maintenance manager or on-site manager can close the work order or place it in waiting once all of the following forms are uploaded to the work order in Folio. 1, pictures of the work being done and the work being completed. 2, the turnover report for on-site managers that is completed in full. This form must annotate the first time the on-site manager did her report, and if there are further modifications that need to be done by the handyman, then the second inspection done at a further date, reflecting that whatever was incorrect is now completed by the handyman. Thirdly, invoices for materials purchased. 4, labor hours. 5, signed work order by both the handyman and the on-site manager. And sixth and finally, the charge reference form must be uploaded here as well. This document is given to the tenant once that tenant leaves to show him or her what is going to be charged, and should be uploaded here as a good reference point for all the expenses for that turnover. Step 1. Once the work is completed, the on-site manager must make sure the work order has the following items completed as well. 1. Handyman or vendor's notes are in Folio. This seems very simple, but it's actually very complex. These notes must explain what the handyman did to fix the problem. This is very important because the on-site manager must stop and think about whether the problem is truly fixed. For example, if we have a humidity problem, the on-site manager must make sure that the area that was humid was completely removed. For example, let's say the floor was completely removed, and make sure that the problem is fixed at the root. Then, let's say 2 weeks later, a follow-up inspection must be scheduled to verify that no further humidity issues arise. This is very important because we've had situations where the handyman makes sure he addresses the flooring being humid, but the root problem is not truly fixed or addressed. And a few months later, we have the same problem, but it's now worse. And this puts people's lives at risk. So we want to make sure that every single time we have a humidity problem or any type of real situation with electrical, roofing, the problem is addressed at its root. The technician notes must explain what the root cause was and how he or she fixed it. If there is no explanation of the solution, then we cannot close the work order. I'll say this in a separate way. If the handyman says that he did A, B, and C, but he does not truly explain why the problem is fully addressed, then the work order cannot be closed. On-site managers, this is where your liability kicks in. In order for you to make sure we protect our tenants correctly and that you're doing your job correctly, if we're not sure that the job was completed in a reasonable manner, or we don't have enough information, please do not close that work order and let us know so that we can fully address it with the handyman or the third-party vendor. Also, please keep in mind that if the work order points out 4 issues and the handyman only talks about 3 issues in the work order, do not close that work order because obviously it's incomplete. Secondly, after the work order is complete, make sure the handyman or vendor input their hours in Folio. On-site managers, please keep in mind that for workers or vendors that do not know how to input their hours in Folio, you should input their hours for them. And they should sit down with you and give you the correct information and complete information for you to be able to reflect that in their hours in Folio. Number 3, on-site managers must make sure there are before pictures and after pictures reflecting the work that was completed. Number 4, confirm the work order is signed by the tenant, by the technician, and by the on-site manager. We also have a video on how tenants can sign via their phones. This video is attached here too as well. And number 5, we must make sure we have receipts for the labor and the material purchased. So for example, the labor would be the third-party vendor or the handyman's hours, and the material purchase is very important that we have all those invoices uploaded into Folio from either Home Depot, Ferguson, or any type of store from which we bought the material. On-site managers, without any of these 5 steps, we cannot continue with closing this work order. After we verify these 5 steps, then it is the on-site manager's job to determine if it's the tenant's responsibility to pay for this work order. The on-site manager must always assume that it is the tenant's responsibility because most of our units are fully remodeled units. Once it is determined that it is the tenant's responsibility, we go to create a bill by going to Actions in Folio, clicking on Create a Bill on the right-hand side, then adding Parts and Supplies and adding Maintenance Tech Hours. Then we create the bill on the tenant ledger for that tenant. This step must be done by the accounting team. So the on-site manager must be in communication with our accountant in order to create this bill. If everything is complete at this time and the first 5 steps are completed and the bill has been completed to charge the tenant, then the on-site manager must place the work order in waiting. If items are still missing, then send an email to the maintenance tech and/or on-site manager requesting missing documents. Finally, the on-site manager can choose to send a work order survey to tenant. Please always try to do this so that we make sure we are improving on our communication skills and our work. Next, let's talk about turnovers. For turnovers, coordination is the name of the game. After the FMOs or final move-outs are completed, the on-site manager and handyman must inspect the unit together to determine what job needs to be done. Step 1. On-site manager must complete an inspection of the unit with the handyman and complete the checklist for what will be charged to the tenant, along with a list of all items that must be completed, and open up a work order/turnover of the specific unit. Step 2. At that point, the maintenance manager must determine what needs to be done and what materials need to be purchased. Step 2. The maintenance manager or on-site manager must then order all necessary materials online. Step 3. Maintenance manager or on-site manager must schedule the turnover work and time to be completed. Step 4. The on-site manager must inspect the unit once the turnover is complete. The on-site manager must then complete the turnover report for on-site managers, which is this exhibit here, reflecting any modifications that must still be completed by the handyman. This is a great internal control for the on-site managers to check our handyman and our handyman to check our on-site managers. It keeps both parties in check and protects everyone. Once all the work is completed by handyman and checked by the on-site manager, the maintenance manager or on-site manager can close the turnover work order once the following items are completed and uploaded to the work order in Folio. 1. Pictures of the work completed. Turnover report for on-site manager must be completed in full. It is important to note that when there are issues the first time the on-site manager walks and they're annotated in that report, there's a second line reflecting that the work was in fact completed at a future date. 3. Invoices for materials purchased. And 4. Signed work order by the handyman and the on-site manager.